All right, so five, four, three, two, and one. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I'm thrilled to have as my guest today, Karen Carona. Karen, welcome.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
Appreciate it. So, Karen is a licensed therapist in the state of Oregon and California with an office based in Portland. She currently provides both telehealth and in person sessions, specializing in trauma therapy for women. Through her background as a psychotherapist, she's developed unique insights to lead creative empaths out of chaos and into harmony. She understands the lived experience of suffering and emotional pain due to the effects of childhood wounds and being caught in a self medicating cycle. Many years ago, she had an impactful therapy experience as a client, which allowed her to be free from the entanglements of her own inner prison. Karen, thanks for being here. I'm in Bend, Oregon.
I know. And I realized that on one of listening to your podcast that you're in Bend.
Yeah.
And I would like to eventually get closer to Bend when there's a little bit more sunshine than here
Yeah.
in
Look,
Portland.
thank you so much for being here. Before we get going, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Originally, I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area and basically lived in California, Northern and Southern California for 45 years. And then I moved to Oregon in 2016, about 7 years ago, and been based out of Portland, Oregon. So I had wanted to move to Oregon for many years and even had a map above my dorm bed in college of Oregon because I had gone on a road trip and discovered Ashland and Bend and Sun River. And it took some time, but I eventually got here. I got licensed here in 2013 in Oregon. And then I was working at Kaiser Permanente and transferred from Bay Area Kaiser to an office, Kaiser Permanente in mental health in Oregon.
Nice, nice. So, really interesting background you have. How did all this start for you? How did you get into this field?
I got into this field from a place where I wounding, and it first showed up as some major depression in college. And I spent my 21st birthday in a psychiatric hospital. And that also was the first time I got exposed to art therapy and using the expressive arts as a healing modality. And I really connected with that in that somewhat traumatic experience of being hospitalized. Um,
Okay.
and
Wow. So you spent your 21st birthday in a psychiatric. What happened? How did that happen?
I had dealt with depression in high school, but was this taskmaster performance, high achieving part was really driven, and it really hit in college where the depression uh, really took a grip. And so I was, suicidal at the time and was seeing a counselor at the college I was at, and it it evolved into a hospitalization. Um, yeah, I think that's what I'll say about that. And I've
Hmm.
been on, you know, I've been a client as I have been a therapist at the same time. Like I've had client being in
Sure.
that role as I have being in a therapist role, really as kind of a wounded healer, kind of space.
As
Yeah.
have a lot of other guests I've had on here. Yeah. So appreciate you sharing that. You
Mm.
said that in during that experience, you were exposed to art therapy, which seemed to have a was pretty impactful for you.
Yes.
How
Yes.
so? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I've always been a very creative, empathic, sensitive soul, and I really did not fit into my family of origin with that. And my grandmother wrote of each of her seven grandchildren when we were 5 years old. And about me, she said, creative little Miss Petite. She's happy and singing anytime she's doing something with her hands, glue, lace, nature, creating her craft creations. And so I've always been creative. And I've also been a creative entrepreneur. In sixth grade, I held a summer camp, art camp for my younger sister's six friends. They had to pay 50 cents in a can. That's the entrepreneur, right?
I
And
love
I
it.
held these art experiences where there was a craft every day, and I had an art
Wow.
set up in the backyard. So it's been a journey to connect with my creative self, and that process has happened in my healing journey, of moving away from false self, kind of
Hmm.
wounded place into my authentic creative self. And then in graduate school, I was again, after the psychiatric hospitalization with the art therapy, I got exposed to expressive arts therapy and took some classes and then had personal experiences with it as well. And with soul collage, intuitive painting, and art journaling. And that just really kind of was the beginning burgeoning of using art for therapeutic purposes. And
How
then
did you decide? What was the process for you saying, okay, I want to become a therapist. I want to start working with people. And then more specifically, people who'd experienced trauma.
that began in college when I first uh dealt with the depression, and I knew I was really trying to understand myself. I had been given the gift of a book, The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller. I was really on my own quest, and that's what started it. And what was the second part of the question?
Well, more specifically, so you were exposed to that book and you said, or that inspired you to pursue becoming a therapist?
It was one of the inspirations. I mean,
Okay.
I have done many years of therapy, so I felt like if I could give back in a way that was meaningful, like I have one primary therapist I worked for with many years, was very dedicated to my healing. And I just felt like it was part of my soul purpose. I just felt an alignment with um with it. That was my soul calling, right? Like
Hmm.
going through my own healing journey and coming alongside individuals that have emotional wounds and using the art, and now I use IFS as a framework and integrate those two. It's more of a soul calling. I think I would kind of describe it, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I mean, I think that's amazing. I mean, to have that, I mean, that's what I love about this podcast is getting to speak with people like you, like yourself, who through their own experience almost need to reach out. And what was it? Was it reaching out and helping others? How? What did you want to do, Karen, more specifically? How did you want to help people? Did you just want to, or just share your own process, your own journey? Tell us more about that.
Mm, How did I want to help people? I wanted it to translate from some of my experience. Like I remember one therapist, she actually had a tear. Like there was such an empathy for an empathic connection in a way that was transformationally healing. And I think more than the skill set, but it's like the essence of who the therapist was as a person
Hmm.
was a lot of the healing. It
Hmm.
wasn't uh certain techniques or tools. And so I think I really come from that place of who I am, the healing work that I have done, and my essence. And the more I can be in what Dick Schwartz IFS talks about is self energy and connected to my authentic higher self. Um, I mean, healing magic happens, right?
Hmm.
Like it's just and so paying some of what I have been received in my own healing journey feels like my calling, you
When
know.
you said you were talking about that therapist, it was like who she was.
Yeah.
Say more about that. What did you sense? What did you experience?
I experienced, it was this in object relation. I mean, it was like this emotionally corrective experience. And I know from an IF framework, but it was just um we weren't doing a lot of like, not to, CBT or DBT work. We were, it was this empathic holding and a witness to my story as I was processing it. Um, and these were all, I would say, highly gifted therapists that I have worked with that have done their own healing work and were really attuned,
Hmm.
in a way that their presence and how they kind of emotionally held me so that I could do the work happened.
Can you,
Yeah.
yeah, I love what you're saying here. And I think a lot of us, maybe a lot of listeners can get it, but can you give us an example of something that was done or what that therapist might have, how they might have been during a specific, I want to kind of get specific here. What did it
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah. Well, w- if we're going to use the expressive arts and kind of IFS, like I had experiences too where um it was kind of uh depicting visually different parts of myself that we've worked on. And I believe that when there is trauma or traumatic experiences, there's parts of ourselves that eclipse our true authentic self and like this false self emergence. So I worked with it in a way where, for example, um, when I had some unblending around this trauma driven part that is a protective uh, inner taskmaster part that held a lot of the perfectionism, control, trying to earn approval and worth through performance and achievement. When we worked with that, I would actually do a painting of what that embodied for me as I
Hmm.
as I separated more and more from it. And then um there was a kind of a healing befriending process with this part that then allowed me to get to some of the core kind of inner child work and even use art and soul collage to kind of externalize what the internal kind
Okay.
of organization is. And all of this led to the healing where I have access to my creative, authentic higher self. I did not have that for many years. It was
Hmm.
eclipsed by all of my firefighter parts, my manager part, this trauma driven part. And so that's how I understand the process and um, using kind of some of the expressive arts in that journey.
In the bio, uh, I talked about, and the bio you shared, talked about, using your own experience to uh, kind of help others, kind of just like what you're talking about, kind of emerge and find their own creativity. How do you work with people? How do you like to work with people?
I I like to work with people that are open to expressive arts. And so uh there can often be the misconception that you need to be artistic. And that's so you know, that I kind of will address that misconception. And so, for example, if we're working with a perfectionistic kind of anxiety part, we might start with somatic kind of work. Where is that held in your body and kind of
Hmm.
identifying. And then we might shift to in color and shape. What does that look like? Or is there an image that comes to you? And so they might be like, well, I just see all these blue and black dots everywhere. That's the anxiety and it's in my stomach. Okay, let's visually depict that. Um, And then we're working with it in an extra, it's like externalized,
Hmm.
working with the anxiety part. What might be something that would contain that a little bit? What would that look like if you added that to the current image? What would that look like as a creative tool to kind of help you? Um, so and then I use the music often and journaling. I do a lot of invitation to do letter writing to, which I've done in my own journey, a letter to this taskmaster part that became my greatest persecatory part of my inner oppression. But I could see how it was initially protective.
Hmm.
And so in letting go of that part and kind of having it have a different internal organization, I wrote a letter to her.
That's
So,
such an interesting uh, concept about some of these
mm,
parts that,
yeah,
eh, on one hand, we might find very antagonistic or
yes,
burdensome, but on the other hand, they can be protective.
yes. I have so much to say about that.
Uh,
That's
uh,
so true. It's very confusing too.
yeah.
The very part that started out as protective. It was if I could be perfect, I could avoid further shame and fear because I grew up in a family of origin that was very highly religious, conservative in the San Francisco Bay Area, fear and shame based. So if
Mm.
I could be perfect enough, this part, this inner taskmaster, then I could avoid further shame, uh and but what happens with our protective manager parts is they often become persecutory. They're misguided. They did the best they could, but it becomes our greatest internal oppressor because she then, this inner taskmaster, did all the shaming, right? Like, well, that was an A minus, like
Mhm.
that didn't, and then the self-loathing, right? Like the whole shame cycle. So working with the part to befriend and heal to have access to my higher self. And I am really passionate about further developing internal family systems and the expressive arts. I feel like it's a
Mm.
powerful merging. And I don't know a lot of clinicians, and maybe there are out there that are doing this merging and this blend. And that's actually a little bit of my book integrates a little bit of that that's coming out. Yeah, but that's a passion of mine.
Let's talk about this book. When is it coming out? What's it called?
Called Heart Healing for Radiant Living. I have the cover here.
Oh, nice. Wow.
Yeah,
Pretty.
it will be uh coming out in June. I don't have an exact date. I'm working with a non-traditional publishing company. It's in between, it's a hybrid in between self-publishing and a traditional publishing. So I've been involved in a lot of the process. It's taken a lot longer than I anticipated, but it finally will be birthed sometime in June, and I have some book launches coming up. So yeah,
Congratulations. That's
yes.
awesome. So let me just remind everyone, speaking with Karen Corona, her website is karencorona.com. That's Karen, Karen, Corona, Corona.com. So we've got the book coming out in June. How do you how do you work with people? Are you working individually, online? I think online, telehealth. What?
Well, I'm really in a transitional kind of um, business phase because while I do have my full private practice, Greenleaf and Expressive Arts Therapy, I'm also launching my Creative Heart Awakenings coaching business. And so that's going to be the umbrella for my book, doing creative wellness retreats and workshops and groups. And we'll be also working with individuals one-to-one. So I'm kind of in a transitional, and I have both businesses, different websites, and yeah, so I work with individuals right now, telehealth for psychotherapy in Oregon and California. And then I'll be kind of expanding beyond the therapy room with the launch of my coaching business and my book.
And the how are you going to be working with people as a coach? What are you going to be doing specifically?
Well, I went through coaching program for therapists, and I'm a creativity and wellness coach. My first offering is uh, individual 6-week heart healing coaching package. And it basically is um, helping women to heal emotionally through the expressive arts. And can I say one thing about just a little synopsis
Please.
of my book? Okay.
Yeah.
So my book is a creative guide to using the expressive arts to healing emotionally. And it's 52 weeks of expressive arts prompts for healing the heart. That's why it's called Heart Healing, but heart has capitalized ART. It's bringing art into the
Mhm.
wellness journey. And the 52 weeks, I use an expressive arts heart healing framework. So H stands for Heal Your Heart with Art. So each week there's an art prompt. E is express yourself with music and movement. There's creating playlists, there's music, there's Gabrielle Roth's 5 rhythms. There's prompts for that for the
Mm.
E for 52 weeks. The A is affirmations for intentional thought creation and the power. It's a lot of CBT principles in terms of the power of our thoughts on our well-being. R is the ritual of writing and journaling prompts for each of the 52 weeks based on
Oh,
themes. And T is a practice of thankfulness and gratitude, and how a gratitude perspective can be advantageous to our well-being as well.
sounds like it was very well thought out. I love
Well, I
it.
had the help of an amazing holistic manuscript editor who said, you have 2 books here. You have a memoir and you have your therapist lens healing. Let's just do that one, and later you can do your memoir. Because I do
Right.
have another story in me, a memoir. Yeah.
You know, Karen, talking to you, it feels, I mean, you genuinely are sharing yourself and your own story and your own process and your own journey. It's like that's so much a part of the work you're doing. I can feel it.
Yeah. You can. Oh, yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
I
appreciate
need,
you sharing what you shared.
yeah. Yeah. I definitely have been on uh, a journey. And I do think it allows me to connect with those who are brought into my path to work with in a very special way, because if we diagnostically from, borderline personality disorder in my 20s to mood disorder and complex trauma, the whole, if we want to talk diagnostically, right?
Hmm.
And experience some of the pathologizing that even therapists do around,
Of
you know,
course.
and so I do feel that I also hold a powerful story that has an impactful message. And I think that will come out in my memoir. Although I do have little snippets of my story. Like I do talk about the taskmaster part, and I do share about the psychiatric hospitalization and the suicidal ideation on my 21st birthday and some suicide attempts. So I do, but it will come out more fully in a memoir. But
Hmm.
yeah, I just appreciate what you just, that was really, that it's heartfelt. I just appreciate you saying that, Guy.
Well, you're welcome. I mean, so much of what I'm trying to do here on this podcast is to create a platform for people to share their story. And look, we're all going through something.
Yeah.
All of us are,
Mhm.
and your ability to share that authentically uh, helps people. Of course it does, and I think that there's so much healing in that sharing. That's how we connect,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Let
Yeah.
me ask you, as you've grown and developed as a therapist, working with others, Can you share what it's been like for you? I mean, and kind of an early clinical error and what you learned from that.
A good question. An early clinical error. I think some of it in my early, it was I would get caught up in um I don't have enough to offer. Like I was preoccupied with myself and kind of doubting myself. And so I wasn't able in my early years to show up in the way I am today. And I think that has a big difference. So in
Mm,
terms of like clinical errors can always be used for um, even therapeutically for repair in a certain way too, right? Like,
right.
and I think if there I'm not coming up with a specific example of a clinical error, but I do think that how it might be addressed with the client and um kind of repair can go a far way, right?
Yep. Yep.
Or just kind of taking some ownership. You know, yeah, I can see how that response, I got caught in some of my own stuff, right? Like, um, and so I think it's the evolution of me being able to be more my authentic, who I am, and the self energy presence, that has been a process. That didn't just
Was
happen
that
overnight.
challenging for you to own that?
To own that I've been in a long kind of my own
Just
journey.
to own your own, yeah, to own your journey, to own your own experience, to be able to a certain degree share that in the clinical work you do, obviously with boundaries and ethics, of course, but a certain amount of owning your own process and your own story has to go into this work, right?
Yes, and I do as clinically appropriate,
Of
I
course.
will do some self-disclosure, right?
Right.
I'll mention, yeah, I've really worked with this trauma-driven part that's been a manager, wow, she wanted the OCD kind of order, like this is how she operated, right? Like, and then they're like, oh, like it helps with I mean, it just, so the more I've used, I think over the years too, I have used more of kind of my story and appropriate self-disclosure in a way that I think sometimes is deeply healing on their
Hmm.
experience, right? Like
Yeah.
it sometimes it just diffuses the shame. And so much with trauma wounding is, these shame-based parts and the inner shaming that happens. And so when I'll share something, it kind of it really can diffuse it, yeah. Yeah, and there's different I've had so many different experiences in my healing journey that I can, I
Hmm.
mean, even a woman that had postpartum psychosis, I was able to disclose I've
Hmm.
I've been had a manic psychotic. I mean, I'm still like, and that I think helped her so much. She had so much shame as a mother that she
Right.
had this psychotic postpartum depression.
Yeah.
Right? Like I just it's an element that I bring in that I do think has healing transformative kind of, you know, effect.
Yeah,
Um
definitely,
yeah,
definitely appreciate you
yeah,
sharing that.
yeah.
So, all right, what's the best way for people to reach out to you and learn about all the great things you're doing?
My website is the hub, but I'm going to give two websites.
Okay.
One is KarenCorona.com, so my first and last name. And when you first go onto the website, you can sign up to be notified of when pre-sales begin for my book. and it has my coaching website. My psychotherapy website for therapy clients is Karen Carona, lcsw.com.
We'll have those linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com.
Wonderful.
Congratulations with the book.
Thank you,
Thank you
Pat.
so much for being here and just being open and being courageous enough to share your own process and your own journey. I mean, that's what this podcast is about. Love to have you back.
Oh, thank you. Wonderful opportunity. I love what you're doing here, and thank you so much.
Appreciate it. All right, we'll be in touch. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.